Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to give a couple more minutes for more people to register, to get ready, and thank you so much for your patience. Please bear with us. Okay, we're going to get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Maintaining Work-Life Balance While Working from Home. My name is Anya. I'm the Manager for Market Support and Program at BCCIE. Our presenter today is Christina Furtado from Toronto. She's a mental health and wellness specialist with keep.meSAFE program by GuardMe. And before we get started, we would like to acknowledge that at BCCIE, we live and work on the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. We acknowledge the land we're meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississauga of the Credit. A quick info about our audience today. We have over 50 people registered as of yesterday from both the private and public post-secondary institutions, and a few colleagues from the language sector and different education association services from BC and out of province. Welcome, everyone. Some housekeeping information for you. We're going to have a Q&A session at the end, but throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the question box in you go to webinar control panel, and I'll bring them up throughout the webinar and during the Q&A session at the end. But if you want to ask questions live during the actual presentation, please raise your hand to request for the mic, and we will unmute you so you can talk to us. The presentation and handout can be downloaded from the control panel. We will be sharing the recording on our website as well. So you should be able to see that there are 2 PDF documents under the handout for you to download. Now, without further ado, I will turn the time over to Christina. Christina, thank you so much for joining us from Toronto.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to my home, and thank you so much for allowing me into yours. So today we are all faced with disruptions as a result of COVID-19 that has really collided two different worlds that we've been accustomed to having separation, which is our personal lives as well as our professional lives. And in some cases, based on your own individual dynamics and family dynamics, you yourself may also have additional roles on top of what you are trying to manage. So today's time together is really looking at what can we do as simple techniques, simple strategies, or even just our thought process and perception on making this experience less of a negative impact, less of an overwhelmed experience, and look at moving forward with adapting to what may be a new normal for us. And given, again, the roles that all of you have with regards to recruitment and marketing, we're going to also be talking about establishing new expectations and sort of what that may look like. So before we get into the various strategies and tips, one thing that's really important to identify and sort of be mindful of is what our traditional experience with mental wellness is when faced with regular and sort of, if you will, normal life experiences and challenges. So just like our physical health is not something that is static, it sort of does change, not only as we get older, our body changes, but due to other factors, our physical health can also change and sort of be impacted and sort of shift along a continuum of, feeling healthy to being ill. So our mental wellness is the same. It falls along a continuum from what is excelling, that dark green on the image that's on your screen, to the red, which is in crisis. And traditionally, we, within sort of a familiar territory of experience, we tend to hover around that light green, that thriving or healthy state of mental well-being. And that's normal mood fluctuations. We're in control mentally, few sleep disturbances, and we sort of just take things in stride. As a result of the COVID-19 disruption, we very quickly found ourselves transitioning from that thriving state of being to an unsettled or reacted state, which is that yellow, to now even potentially ourselves being within that orange, which is struggling or injured. So we are experiencing, feelings of anger, anxiety, or just even a negative attitude or poor concentration. It may not even necessarily be where we're sitting at, and though it could be what someone else is experiencing and sort of displaying to us. Increased stress anxiety is a normal response during pandemics. It's something that we, again, are faced with. And though what we need to do in order to better manage those increased and intensive levels of stress or understand that of others, we need to name it. And when we name it, we perhaps have a better opportunity and chances of managing it. So really, it's looking at from bare bones, from the basics, our level of understanding of what stress is, and frankly, identifying the purpose of it. So we can have and be provided a more probable and supportive outlook on changing our perspective, which then in turn will allow us the platform to be creative, to be strategic in redefining and recalibrating what our role is and how we are going to fulfill that long term. So stress is a person's total response to environmental demands or pressures that disrupt your equilibrium, your balance. In the situation of pandemics and where we find ourselves currently with regards to uncertainty, even long-term plans, financial disruptions, economic toll, impact on interpersonal relationships, all of these different areas of our personal and professional lives have really been challenged at this time. And it boils down to fear. And when we're talking about fear in the concept of stress, it does have a purpose. And stress in this particular case is the body's warning alarm telling you to take active precaution. And the fear is towards expectations and needs not being met. So we have expectations that we put on ourselves with regards to, again, our role within families, our role within institutions, so professionally, and though there's expectations that others have of us as well. Not only, again, personally, but also professionally, there are certain expectations given your roles that have been placed on you inherently. So there's fears and stress levels increase because there's that fear that I can't meet that expectation based on what's happening now. So what am I supposed to do? What comes next? And that really does fuel and directly relate to that sensation of anxiety, which again is very normal. We all experience it. It is a fight flight type of response to stress, where it's the feeling of fear, worry, or uneasiness. And in order to better manage those levels within ourselves so we can better support, better plan, strategize, or even problem solve in our professional life, it is crucial that we boost our coping mechanisms to improve our overall well-being in our personal lives. So looking at ourselves as an individual, outside of the roles that we hold within the organizations, institutions that we work for. So when it comes to identifying the stress and when it comes to really looking at the feelings that we are experiencing, or even understanding and being empathetic to the feelings that others are experiencing as a result of this very unique and unprecedented disruption, it's normal to have feelings like anger, sadness, or even stress. We experience them for various reasons. We all really try to come up with ways of coping, and some will be more successful of coping mechanisms than others. So in order to identify the effectiveness and the success rate of our coping mechanisms, we need to identify what our automatic pilot is. And when we're talking about our automatic pilot, it really is identifying that mental health, so how our minds are, our thoughts, our feelings, and our reactions are in relation to circumstances. So right now, we, again, have had two of our worlds collide without any real preparation. And some thoughts that might be created as a result of this collision is with regards to future steps or next steps. So how can I fulfill, the enrollment requirements and recruit certain students when I'm used to, traveling and discussing things with different agents and having different relationships. So I am now at jeopardy of potentially losing my job or potentially a revenue stream. All of these thoughts that you have are very much a reflection of your perception of the situation. And those thoughts create very specific feelings. Now, the feelings then in turn create specific behaviors, and we have one or two choices at this time. We can be reactive in our behavior, and that will reinforce the negative thought or that worry thought that we have. And then in turn, that cycle will just continue and spiral, frankly, out of control. Or we can choose to acknowledge what we are feeling, what the thought actually is, try to change our perspective, and allow our behavior to be more responsive to reinforce a new thought pattern. Now, this sounds overly complicated. I can appreciate that as you hear it. And though it is actually quite simple when you commit to that process and when you are actually conscious of that process in that pause and really try to move forward in embracing a new perspective and actually looking for the new perspective. When we have this type of ability, we also are more open to talking about what we're feeling so we can better cope with carrying that problem around. And without those thoughts controlling us, we provide the platform by changing that perspective so we control the thought. And when we're dealing with students, when we're dealing with other sort of stakeholders within our role, whether it be agents, families, students themselves, the institution, colleagues, whichever the case may be, it is a matter of expressing and identifying that we've all been impacted in some way as a result of this COVID-19 situation. There is a loss that we've all had, and whether that be a loss of social connection, a loss of what has been familiar with regards to routine, a loss of what has become more of a monotony towards your roles and how you fulfill that to be. So this screen that I have in front of you now is really identifying that those stages to stress that we are and have experienced as a result of this disruption really have a direct relationship and correlation to the grieving process. And grief is that normal internal feeling one experiences in a reaction to a loss. So we feel that the world has changed, and it has. We also know that it's temporary, but it doesn't quite feel that way. And we realize that things will be different. There is change to come. And the loss of normalcy, the fear of an economic toll or financial impact, the loss of connection and social face-to-face, this is hitting us. And we're grieving. And we're grieving collectively. We're not used to this kind of collective grief in the air. Frankly, it's a matter of part of the grief as well as anticipatory. So trying to imagine the future in which we expected it to be, and whether that be, again, personally or professionally, we establish certain expectations and a roadmap in order to fulfill those expectations. And we find ourselves right now losing the ability to fulfill those steps in the way that we anticipated. So there's a grief behind that. We might also be feeling, that there's a loss of safety depending on where you reside, or even depending on where families are, or certain situations with regards to people that you know. There isn't a map, that we can actually have right now that's going to provide us some sort of framework or stability with the unknown and the uncertainty. And that really highlights why and how we go through this cycle, and why others also are going through this cycle without really even being aware of it. There's denial. So the stage one of that stress was that buildup, right? The denial that, we saw earlier on where, this virus won't affect us. It's not going to really have an impact. It's happening across the water. It's happening across the country. So while there was feelings of nervousness or even concern, it wasn't really close enough to home for us to really experience the intensifying symptoms of stress and overwhelming. And then we transitioned into, the anger or the emotional changes and the aggravation, if you will, of those symptoms, and even the spread of them within us, to where it's like, oh, what do you mean you're making me stay home and taking away my activities? What do you mean I have to try to figure out a different way to connect with colleagues or connect with people within my professional network? Then we sort of look at the bargaining aspect. So, okay, so if I social distance for 2 weeks, yeah, everything will be better, right? Like things will go back to normal, right? And then we get into the actual emotional and symptom manifestation, if we were to look at that relationship. So that stage 5 of stress versus that guidance and direction aspect of feelings, where it's like, oh my goodness, okay, I am feeling this way. I know what I'm reacting to, and I just don't know when this is going to end. So we're sort of sitting in that state of loss and uncomfortability and being overwhelmed of not really knowing what's to come. And in order for us to have that sort of shift and embrace next steps and sort of identifying even the planning stages of what that looks like, we need to sort of succumb to those symptoms. I acknowledge what we are actually experiencing, acknowledge that fear that we have, that worry that we have. And it brings us to that state of acceptance. And that is the simple fact of this is happening. It has had an impact. And I, as each individual, need to figure out a way of how to proceed. Now, it's not about how to proceed in the direction of what was normal before or what was familiar before. It's about looking at how to proceed in a way that will be successful for you, not only for your mental well-being, but also your interpersonal relationships and professional life. When we can gain a hold of that in a more positive way, we can start being creative, start looking at planning and problem solving within our professional world so we can execute certain things in a successful manner. Every day in our professional and personal lives, we face challenges. We face decisions that cause our stress levels to escalate. It is the ability to step back and take a different view that is crucial at this time. When we carry around negative viewpoints, it sucks our energy right out. It weighs us down, and it really impacts our ability to look at things in a different way. And that really sort of introduces that concept of perceptions. Perceptions are influenced by a number of factors. They're influenced by our experience, personal values, judgments. It's impacted and influenced by information as well as the lack of information, our needs and desires. And yet it is possible to expand that perception and to change our behavior and to change how we see things. So right now, it is the case that we need to appreciate that perception is our reality. So how we see something becomes our truth. Because again, those thoughts are very much ours. They generate and create very specific feelings about that circumstance. So it can be sometimes quite self-limiting. And that's what we have found during this particular time of COVID and why there is such a perspective of chaos around changing what people were normally experiencing with regards to education, with regards to our job responsibilities, with regards to our home lives, and really just how do I do this? So shifting perspectives is like tricking the mind. You flip the script. Our brains are really wired to look for negative. It's just how we're made. Our existence as humans relied on us seeing all the dangers around us. So we can identify what active precaution do I need to put in order to protect any loss. So some of the steps to this very simple task, while may seem a little over the top, and though it can really allow us to see the positive things within our current circumstance. But first and foremost, the first step is describing that situation. So what is that circumstance? And this is something that, again, you can apply the same type of strategy not only to your personal life, but also to your professional life and how you view your identity to be. Quite often during times of pandemic where there is uncertainty, there is possible even job security issues or concerns with that, individuals lose their sense of identity, because I myself have experienced job loss in the past in a career that I had invested so much into, and I sort of had this type of image within the industry, and I had certain responsibilities, and when I lost the job, I lost a bit of me and how I saw myself within a different world. So it's fair to say that that would be a normal experience in such circumstances that we find ourselves today. So when we describe the situation, we're capturing the most important details so we can gather our thoughts and really allow us to engage step 2, which is lay the foundation of crafting. What is my current perspective on this situation? What am I fearful of? What am I worried about? And really generating the opportunity to identify and frame a viewpoint in a different perspective that will allow you a little bit more positive of an outlook, and then choosing one of those alternatives to use for the next week. We know within the field of psychology that you can break habit by engaging in a different type of behavior and routine on a consistent basis, and consistency will dictate what is inherently normal for you to do. So we want to sort of get into that robotic option of changing our perspective by identifying different things that are positive. So we are all here in this together. We will improvise, we will adapt, and we will overcome. In this moment, we are not only faced with recalibrating and identifying new ways of working and focusing on increasing, our ongoing needs or the ongoing needs of others that we come into contact with in real time. We need to look at this as an opportunity, a rosebud, if you will, in creating new solutions, creating a new normal, and redefining ourselves in a way that can be positive, that can be productive, and that can actually be supportive. So here's another way of changing our perspective. And this is something that's super simple, and we can actually do this with others. And it's called the Rose check-in. So I was introduced to this concept a long time ago, and it was one that I haven't really utilized until more recently when I was reintroduced to it by a colleague. So the Rose check-in is, that perspective that we have, that current situation that we are faced with. Identifying that as a result of that, can I find a rose? Did a rose come out of this experience, which is something that is going well? Can I identify a rosebud? So an opportunity that has presented itself. Do I identify with more of a thorn? So a challenge that I'm faced with as a result of my newfound normal? Or is it that I'm just unsure? So I'd like to engage you in participating in this Rose check-in. So we can do it of two ways. One, you can identify your Rose check-in, which of the 4 options provided here on the screen do you identify with, and you can type it in the chat box for everyone to see. Or if you feel comfortable and you want to verbally share it live, just place your hand up in the screen and we'll unmute you to share your Rose check-in. But I will start. So I'm going to identify with a rosebud. So my rosebud, so opportunity, is while I have been accustomed to having my home as home base because I travel for work, as most of you as well, this has provided me an opportunity to look at my household, get a little bit more organized with regards to my home life, so it's not as chaotic as it was before. But this has also provided me an opportunity and a platform to host these live webinars for a number of different audiences across Canada and really plant a seed in a number of people to change perspective. So while we are all responsible and we all have our role in curbing the spread of the virus, I've looked at this opportunity that I've been presented as an opportunity to change people's perspective of their experience as a result of the virus. So that's my Rose check-in. I invite any of you to also share your check-in. Is there anyone that wishes to do so? Raise your hand and we can unmute you. Don't be shy. Enya, do you have something to share?
Sure, yeah, I can share a rosebud as well. So for me, I think it's more like spend more time with family and my partner because we don't get to do exercise together. And so we discovered this virtual dance party, and we've been doing it every day. And that's something that we've never done before. So that's something new, and it's a great opportunity, great timing for bonding as well. And for Thorn, I'll give you an example as well. I'm pretty active. I like to be outdoor, go for a hike or go to the park for a run. But because we're all in practicing social distancing, so it's very challenging to not being able to be outside. So instead, then we just do the virtual dance party, and you turn the challenge to an opportunity, I guess.
That's exactly it. It's all in perspective and flipping the script. And that is the thing. While, yes, there have been challenges, yes, there have been disruptions, when we focus on the negative, we actually dictate what our perception is going to be, which is going to be negative. And the approach that is vital, not only for your own personal life, but also for a business perspective with regards to fulfilling your role, it's really going to be critical in changing that vision. So embracing the opportunity to be creative in coming up with different strategies, more unique strategies on how to continuously promote and recruit, because this is temporary. If we think about this as being our new norm, we're actually creating barriers for our own success. It is the time for resiliency, and it's the time for perseverance. And we all have that ability to take control back and achieve that outcome. Now, some of the things that we also wanted to talk about is with regards to sort of transitioning from work and colliding both of those worlds of work and personal life under one roof, which can be very challenging in itself, given other people's routine disruptions and, frankly, expectations that they may have on how this is all going to play out. And I've gotten a lot of feedback from a number of different people with regards to their experiences of having now to, embrace having a home office if they haven't already. So losing that social connection with colleagues in the office, or, having the inability to travel, which is when you've had your human physical contact. I know for myself, that is a very significant part of my role within the keep.meSAFE team. And I've lost that. So I've had to become quite creative in also creating those newfound opportunities to stay connected. So one thing that I'd like to sort of highlight on the screen, and I'm not going to talk to it at great length because I think that you guys can sort of manage and navigate the screen on your own, but there are ones that I tend to like to highlight as key tipping points to better managing and coping with the transition and that work-life balance that we're all striving for. The first and foremost is with regards to a dedicated workspace. Now, in some cases, some of us might have the luxury of having a home office space, whereas others are trying to sort of makeshift a temporary work area. And what I say about dedicated workspace, this is engaging in developing and sort of setting yourself up for your work day in a static location within your home. So not something that you have to take down. So for example, if your dining room table is something that you have been using as your work area, and then you have to sort of dismantle everything, put it aside so people can have their meals, and then all of a sudden you're resetting things up. That's where I'm saying dedicate a space. So if you do have to temporarily use your dining room table, or even share that with someone else in the home, it's communicating what that expectation is going to be. That work area is not to be taken down and then reestablished again. It's supposed to be static. But you want to also look at planning out what you're going to do. And while I encourage you to maintain as close of a routine as you possibly can, the reality is you may have others in the home that had a very different routine, a very different structure, and also have different expectations that are placed on them. So you now have to manage two different perspectives, two different motives, two different intentions. So in order to do that, it's really important to communicate and establish a new routine for the household, and not necessarily a routine for each role that you play outside of the household. Choose a definitive start and a definitive end to your day. And there's other aspects here that I also encourage you to introduce in order to maintain work-life balance. Now, your expectations shape your reality. I've introduced you to the idea and the concept that perception is also reality. So the lens that you wear when looking at a particular situation that you are in creates what that reality for you is going to be. So during this time where we are transitioning from what was familiar to what is unfamiliar, we need to set new expectations. We need to communicate what those are, be very clear in stating what that expectation is in order to decide and affirm what's working and what's not working. It can be quite difficult to let go of the idea that expecting something to happen will make it happen. We as humans also have a tendency to sort of pin our hopes of happiness on fulfilled expectations. Well, there are a few things in life that we can control. We can't control other people's reactions, how they treat us, or even how an event will turn out. We have no control over that. So we have to look at and regain control over the things that are within our grasps of having some sort of impact on. So we can't expect a similar performance. We can't accept a similar outcome. We can't accept things to go back to the way that they were. So understanding the why in establishing what those new expectations are. So again, expectations that you have personally in your family dynamic, expectations that you may have with your employer, with families, with recruiters, with your network. It's following the same guidelines, and that is establishing that new dynamic, that new relationship while still maintaining it. So when we all understand the why and we provide the context and the justification for expectations changing and needing to change, we also increase individuals' accountability for meeting those expectations. So it helps people understand the bigger picture, and you will actually gain their support, their buy-in, if you will. Because in your roles, you come in contact with many different individuals with, again, different intentions, different motives. It really is important to calibrate those expectations. So within your home, look at the routines and workloads and how that might be impacting your current situation and dynamic, and come up with a new routine that is in agreement to everyone involved. And that includes your children, regardless of how old they are. Young children in the same way deserve to have their needs and expectations met within reason. So we have to consider that within our calibration of our routines. Be open to feedback. And then again, it's important to have everyone agree to those new expectations in order to be accountable and follow through. With the lack of clearly understood expectations being really a contributing factor to, the cause of most conflict, as well as disappointment, stress levels increasing, and really it's also the beginning of poor organizational performance. Lack of boundaries, or really not maintaining healthy boundaries, can also be a contributing factor that negatively impacts relationships. And we're not just talking about personal relationships, we're talking about any interpersonal relationship. So again, in your role as marketing and recruitment, you guys have various relationships that you're trying to maintain, that you try to have within your network in order to fulfill your role and get those students coming or build that relationship from school to school or institution to institution, whatever the case may be. So now that we're trying to establish those new expectations, those boundaries are equally important, but we need to understand what boundaries are. So I'm not, again, at great length going to speak to this slide because I think you all can do that on your own when you view the slide deck. But I want to highlight again the really important take-home messages as to what boundaries are. So we have a different appreciation as to why they're important to have in any interpersonal relationship that we encounter. And that is the separation of where you end and another person begins, or where you begin and another person ends. I started the presentation by introducing you to your automatic pilot in that, the spectrum in which we all travel with our own mental well-being, and how our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors have a very specific and direct relationship as a result of our perception of the situation. Well, that is very unique to us. And though the concept of automatic pilot is not unique at all, we all have our own. So we can be directly impactful on someone else's thought process depending on how we ourselves behave and model, and then vice versa. So having established boundaries are clearly defined limits. So you are free to be yourself. You are not your jobs. You are not what your role is and the expectations that are placed on you. You're human. So know when to turn it off. Know when you don't have to take that unscheduled meeting. Know that you can work for 10-minute intervals and slowly build it up to a larger uninterrupted work period if you have young children. You need to get your home in order, need those established expectations and boundaries in order for you to fulfill and even create a new familiar routine in the new normal. Now, that's not to say that I am not realistic, nor honest in saying, being afraid of change and being even afraid of potential career impacts isn't the case. And it is. It's natural during this time. And we've seen it in the news where certain jobs are impacted, and depending on, again, what stipulations have been put on you, then you need to sort of look at that. So here are some areas that can help you in dealing with those fears. Now, when we are looking at facing those fears, it does imply taking risks. So you take the step forward into the unknown. You need to be flexible enough as well as courageous enough to leave the familiar routine behind and try something new. You should improve your chances of success through, again, planning, preparation. And when you embrace the unknown for what it is, which is unknown, you lessen your fear. Change means giving something up, letting go in order to move forward. Letting go can be difficult. It could involve losing some sense of self. And often letting go is the biggest block of some career changes that need to happen. So with that said, it's really, again, important to identify where you can switch your perspective. Fear has a purpose. Once you accept and recognize what you are fearful towards or worried about, it serves to alert you to take action of that possible loss. So be creative, overcome the fear, and embrace the change. What's stopping you but fear? Here are some simple tips as well that sort of just summarize a lot of what we've spoken of today with regards to techniques and strategies of, knowing your limits, know what your stress levels are, pay attention to what your coping mechanisms are, structure and plan out your new routine, structuring in breaks, other areas of intentional self-care, connection with others, being creative that way, and using technology as a means of staying connected. Friends of mine, as well as colleagues of mine, we've established different opportunities through technology of staying connected and seeing each other's faces. You can do the same way in all areas of your life, even through networking. It's about being creative in establishing that new routine that sort of also sets yourselves aside. Sorry, as my throat is drying out. Now, that is not to say that you can't plan on what may happen or those what ifs. It's about being proactive in a way to lessen the anxiety and not intensify it. So some strategies around that: identify specific worries that you have, and you can do that both professionally as well as within your personal, of how this virus may have disrupted or has disrupted your life. Then make a list of possible solutions of what may sort of help you in lessening those worries, or even coming up with solutions to solve them. Once you've evaluated those options of what is something that you can do in the now versus long term if the situation changes, draw up a plan of action. When you're done, set it aside, and you don't revisit it until circumstances significantly change or until you need to. If the what ifs tend to spiral out of control, I've included here a very special and simple technique that can help you ground yourself to the present moment, that re-engages your balanced brain and allows you to problem solve, strategize, and really be more proactive in a positive way in your planning. In order to cope with stress, fear, and the uncertainty that we are all facing right now, engaging in intentional self-care is also a tip that can help lessen that anxiety that you may be experiencing. So that's really looking at opportunities and activities that take care of your body and of your mind. And with the first one here on the screen, I've said to be kind to yourself. So I've asked us all to be quite empathetic with the experience of others that we have come into contact with, or we may come into contact with, that everyone has their own automatic pilot. And in some cases, behaviors are more reactive versus responsive. So similar to people stealing all the toilet paper in the store or hoarding, different items. That's a reactive behavior. It's not proactive, and it's not necessarily responsive to a more positive experience or empathetic pathway to others. It's a very reactive behavior towards a feeling of fear. So be kind to yourself. Know that you're not alone in your struggles. Know that you are human, and that it is about maintaining a calmer and less chaotic home that will actually allow you to be productive and successful within your roles professionally. So we need to draw the line and really establish that our mental wellness is going to be priority over anything else. I've encouraged you also to stay informed, but also sort of limit your news consumption to the most accurate and recent information, to just keep yourself in the know, because that will help also to alleviate some of the fear. But we want to be factual in the information that we receive. So the WHO, Public Health Agency of Canada, the CDC, as well as local or provincial public health agencies will provide you that information. Stick to that. Sort of encourage people as well as yourself not to utilize social media as your fountain of information. We need to remind ourselves that social media platforms are based on individual perceptions and not always based on factual information. Other mental health and well-being support are resources, again, available for support, and it's important not only for our own well-being, but our support in others as well. So local hotlines and distress lines and distress centers that are available 24/7 are there as a means of support. I've included here 3 free apps that look at, self-help, simple tips towards anxiety management or general mental health. I've included a link for a body scan meditation that is also quite helpful and useful in identifying how your body does respond to stress. What does stress and anxiety feel like in yourself? With that said, I have included as one of the handouts a mental health self-care wheel, which identifies different categories, if you will, of what makes us human, and different ideas of self-care tips and strategies for each of those categories. If you're concerned with regards to your physical well-being and your physical health due to COVID, there are 2 different resources here that I've included. There's the COVID-19 BC support app and self-assessment tool, as well as the URL for Maple, which does provide some different assessments as well around those symptoms. When looking at our mental health support that may be available not only for ourselves, but some of our student populations. For ourselves, employee and family assistance programs. So it's important to talk to more superior representatives within your organizations and identify if you do have an employee and family assistance program, and that tends to be 24-hour, 7-day-a-week counseling support. And then for students, there is the Keep Me Safe by GuardMe clinical support program, which is also available 24/7 for eligible students. And what that means is that some of the schools that brought in the Keep Me Safe program for some of their student populations prior to the COVID disruption will still have access to that support network even with this disruption. It's there available to them. And though they are to have that program prior to the COVID outbreak. Now, if you are unsure or if you are in a position to where you'd like to voice with your colleagues introducing this students' mental wellness support program to your student population, I've included an email address here, inquiries@keepmesafe.org, for you to address any of those questions. Now, just as a wrap up, I've encouraged us all to try a perspective shift, and I've placed one here on the screen for us to try. But with that said, you can read through that. Some change is needed during this unique time. And it's clear to us that collectively the efforts of provinces, of territories, education associations and institutions, as well as each one of us individually, can put Canada's educational system back on the path of moving forward and looking forward to new opportunities. And I thank you for joining me today, for joining us today. And if you're interested in maximizing the opportunity to support your students, to support your colleagues, please do send me an email. We can discuss looking at different presentations and webinars, not only that will be hosted during the course of this isolation period that we've all been experiencing through Keep Me Safe by GuardMe, but we can also do some with your individual institutions. So my email is there for you to make reference to, which is Christina@keepmesafe.org. And I'd like to open the floor to either the chat room or hands for any questions. So I'd like to open the question period.
Awesome. Thank you, Christina. Just a reminder for people that you can actually download today's presentation and the two handouts under the handout session on the GoToWebinar control panel. And Christina has been very generous and letting us to share with our colleagues and students. Also, we will be sharing the recording of today's session on our website. So feel free to come back and refer it to.
Perfect.
Please feel free to raise your hand so we can unmute you for any questions.
So I'm not seeing any hand. Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you. I'm glad you found it useful. Again, my objective and my rosebud has been just planting a seed of different perspectives and trying to have a more positive impact on how individuals are experiencing this disruption, and knowing that this is just temporary. And if we are all in this together and we look at it from a positive perspective of change is good. Change can be good. Change can be exciting, not only for personal growth, but professional growth. And we've been provided the opportunity to look at that change. Thank you. You're welcome.
Thanks, everyone. As we're wrapping up, we're going to just give a few more minutes for more questions if there's any. And if you're interested to check our upcoming webinars or events, please visit our website as we're planning a few more webinars in the next couple of weeks.
So Patricia, your hand was up a while ago, and I'm not sure as to why we missed that. So I apologize. I'm unmuting you now. If you'd like to share what you wanted to share.
Thank you.
My sincerest apologies.
That's okay. Don't worry about that. A question about what happens if you're coaching a team, if you have a team, and I guess some people are maybe more nimble or more accepting of sort of the new circumstances. Some of them are having more of a difficult time.
Mm-hmm.
How can you sort of, in a sense, gather or coach your team together when you have different people at different stages per se?
And
so you're all moving in that same sort of direction. What things that you seen that could be helpful in that regard?
Yeah, and I sort of look at it from the same perspective of when I'm working with a client that may have, which again, just appreciate my example within reason. So when a client has been encouraged to come to counseling by family members and just is not at that same level of appreciation for why they might need it. So right now we are faced with, again, what is unfamiliar to people because they don't know how to manage it. So part of it is meeting them where they're at and working towards the common goal. And it may be that collaboration of establishing those new expectations are breaking it down into smaller steps that this individual or individuals have a different appreciation for. Having them part of that process, having them explain even, okay, well, what worked in the other way that we did things, when we did see each other or when we had those meetings and it was very much positive and we were all on the same page. And while we can't stop working, we have the opportunity to look at what did work and what can we do now. And having them part of that, but really meeting them where they're at and just looking at smaller steps of progress within the overall plan so they can get their head around it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I hope that answered your question and gives you some perspective of maybe how to proceed.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome. So I'm just scrolling the attendees to ensure that I did not miss a hand. And I'm not seeing any more hands. So I am seeing a few thank yous in the questions and chat boxes. So thank you. Again, I truly am genuinely appreciative for the opportunity to speak to you all and being provided this platform to do so. And again, thank you for allowing me into your homes. And I do wish you all the very best. Stay healthy, stay safe, stay positive. Another suggestion as well for Patricia, something that I just sort of thought about that we do and that I tend to do before I start any meeting, and it's regardless of who it's with, is actually doing check-ins. It's really important to understand people's emotional perspective because when they are in emotional distress, regardless of what area of that spectrum you're in, it's hard to take in information when you have different emotions of different areas of your life going on. So I tend to start any meeting and all meetings, even with students and even with colleagues, doing a check-in of just like, okay, how are people feeling? And some of us do that already. And though I do it with intention. So I would use that Rose check-in as an opportunity of setting the platform at the beginning of each meeting to set an intention and a tone. So I unmuted you, Patricia. Is that okay?
No, that's terrific. Thank you. I just wrote that down.
Perfect.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for participating, everyone. And thanks so much, Christina, for joining us today from Toronto. And happy Friday. It's Friday.
Happy Friday.
And
it's
please,
virtual pub night.
yeah, exactly. And we're doing a virtual pub this afternoon, you know, just to share, you know, the movies you've been watching or books you're reading or virtual dance party that you've been joining. It's just, you know, keep each other entertained and stay connected with coworkers. So I wish everyone a great weekend, and please stay well, stay healthy, and stay connected with your coworkers, with your friends and your loved ones. Thank you so much again for joining us. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.